Welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we are back here today to do a final NBA Finals show, at least that, with that topic and that theme in mind. We'll be doing some other stuff here in the next couple of weeks, Grayson and I, and then we'll get right into the dog days of summer, where we talk about really anything that we can come up with, and Trivia Showdown, of course, is coming as well. Before we jump into all of that, don't forget that Two Pointers is sponsored by SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase, link in the top of the description. We're going to be, doing baseball, concerts, sporting events, whatever you're going to be doing this summer, or hold on to it and use it later this year, whatever you'd like. I'll be getting some Ohio State Buckeyes tickets for my in-laws for some Christmas gifts that are long overdue, but hey, it's an IOU at that point. But SeatGeek, really appreciate them hooking that up. $20 off your first purchase is going to be able to get you guys the same discount as well. So link in the top of the description for that. Let's jump right into it. Game 5. Mavericks obviously were defeated 106-88 in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. We're joined, of course, by Grayson Hill, as we have been for literally every NBA Finals show in the last 2.5, 3 years. Before we jump into it one last time, at least for this scenario here, introduce yourself and we'll jump into it after that.
Yeah, for the second year in a row, my name is Grayson Hill, and I'm here to recap the fifth and final game of the NBA Finals. So looking forward to it. Obviously, as a basketball fan, I'd love more than 10 games in 2 years, but, we can only control what we can control. So we're going to cover the hell out of the 5 games we got, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, 10 games in 2 years is kind of an interesting way to put it. I honestly would have never thought of it that way, but I was going to say just out the gate, like, I just want to do a 6-game or 7-game series with you. I really do. Right. I want a full like memorable series. Not that this won't be memorable. We'll get into that in just a second, but just the game itself, Game 5 is not the one you're going to remember, if any. And not that this is a question. You're not really going to remember any of these games, if I'm being honest. Just going to remember more of the series.
Maybe Game
3. Yeah, okay. That's fair. But my point is none of these games were enough where you're like, okay, when we think of this series in 10 years, it's honestly the things that came after it, which is what we're here to do today. Before we do that, just a couple of things about the game. I was texting you, keeping you updated in the first quarter. I didn't say this verbatim, and I sorted it on purpose, but I said it to some other folks as well. When Boston went on that 9-0 run in the span of a minute and a half to end the first quarter, I immediately turned and looked at my wife, and I said, this game is over. And she goes, there's 3 quarters left. And I went, what's the expression? I've read this book before. I've seen this movie. I know how this story ends. However you want to say it. That game, and I'm not the only person to say it. There are plenty of people out there today that are saying the same thing, because it finally felt like that we had this moment for Boston, or just maybe it was the momentum. Maybe it was the Mavs looked tired. I can't give you a solid put my foot down reason and say that's why I felt that way. But in a minute and a half in the first quarter with 45 minutes of game time remaining, I was like, this game is completely and legitimately over. And Boston still went on a 7-minute scoring drought in the third quarter. So I don't have a question for you, but that's just open dialogue here. That's how I'd like to start it, because I immediately felt this game was over, and I started preparing this podcast immediately.
Yeah, I think some of that is the presence of Porzingis. He was not his productive normal self. It really took him honestly a half to get his legs underneath him. Which that was the whole reason he wasn't very effective, because of that leg injury. He did play through, to his credit. I didn't think we'd see him back at all, let alone the very next game. So very impressed with the toughness he showed. And, a lot we made of the 38 days he missed and all that stuff. But for him to gut it out and come back to try and, stamp out any attempted history from Dallas, I think was pretty impressive, at least for me. So, and we saw
Porzingis, to be clear, he's not going to have his legs underneath him until training camp. They just announced today in the Boston Globe that he'll have surgery. So,
yeah, not surprised.
Was it worth it for the chance to try to do this again and play 45 games in the regular season and get ready? I don't know.
It worked once. He was kind of in cruise control with his ailments, which is, obviously to a certain extent not controllable either. But they won a title doing it once. I thought the first quarter thing was interesting. We saw this a lot in the third quarter with Boston early. It was how they bounced back in that game 3 I mentioned, giving up the 22-2 run, immediately answered with a dozen-ish points the other way unanswered to seize back control. And they've shown all year the ability to give up control, but it was that role reversal late where, yes, you played terrible to make it a clutch situation, if you will, but they closed the game. And that's not the MO of that team all year. I mean, you look back to the regular season, the most watched regular season game was them almost losing to a 14-win Pistons team, and it took overtime to beat them. And they ended up winning more playoff games than the Pistons won the entire regular season. So I thought that was a funny footnote to the night everyone knew where they were when the Pistons almost beat the Celtics to end their 20 whatever it was game losing streak.
Yeah, just to put the net number in perspective, that just shows you. Hopefully, like if the Pistons don't make the playoffs and they win 30 games, it's gonna be considered like one of the biggest turnarounds in like a decade.
Oh yeah.
Boston's 40-1 this year, regular season and playoffs. When they shoot 40% from three, they shot 33.3%. If this wasn't the game they were gonna win, by whatever the reason was, Jaylen Brown shooting 22.2% from three on 9 attempts. 7 of 23 from the field. Like, a guy goes 30, 22, 83 in the finals game, but, hard defense, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 1 turnover in that span there, 21 points. Like, Brown found a way to still be effective, but, like, it just wasn't his night. And, like, that just shows you how awesome the first 4 games were for him to win finals MVP, which we'll get into that in a minute. It was just more of, my point was, both those guys played 44 minutes, and they still they had control of the game. They constantly defaulted back to what's been their best thing all year, and it's their defense. They just defaulted back to they're an incredible defensive team. They don't need their guys to score whatever, right? And Tatum, 11 of 24, and you say that number, it's like
31,
45%. Yeah, 1 of 7 from 3, but it was still like Boston fans are calling it the Tatum game. And I'm like, we're going to look back at this and go, the 14% on 7 attempts Tatum game? Like, that's crazy. But look, he was the best player on the floor. I mean, that doesn't change that. I don't know, man. Like, I'd be grasping for straws sitting here trying to tell you that there was a moment that I think Dallas had that chance. And, like, I honestly think Dallas waved the white flag around the 2-minute mark in the third quarter. When Boston scored again after that 7-minute drought, I think Dallas officially I think they felt like they were done. They had that weird little, like, fourth wind, if you might call it that, but like Luka looked gassed. There was just these moments in the fourth where I'm like, once Kyrie started, I heard this story today and I was really surprised. Once Kyrie started going to like hug guys in the timeout in the 2-minute area, like he went to hug the Celtics players, like saying congrats with like 2.5 minutes left. Like Celtics fans were like, okay, now it's over. I'm like, guys, you're up 20 points, but that's the thing with this team that I'm giving you this 3-4 minute like roundabout point, but for a reason is even till the bitter end, until 2.5 minutes left in this game, real true Boston fans, I said it earlier this series to you, they all still felt like that this team could give up a lead. They always felt like something was in the background, and they didn't finally do it. So
that's why I watched the whole game as an objective fan, just knowing that with this Boston team, it is never over, regardless of when they're up 20, how they were up 20. There's always a reason to keep watching them play basketball. And we saw it in game 3. They won that game. And they didn't even do that disservice to themselves last night. They just kept their foot on the gas until, kids started emptying the bench, and then Boston followed suit. I thought the way they did it was pretty cool. Al Horford got his own little crowd pop, which was nice.
Absolutely.
His first title somehow. So really excited for him.
Longest active drought. Did you see that?
Yeah, longest Harden, which
technically longest drought in history, but I think there was some guys in there that how they did the list was weird. ESPN ended up having a list that was official, but it was like guys that played. I don't know. It was basically like he's the longest active, and he technically at the time was the longest period. So, it's crazy. Good for him. I'm happy for him. They did the 2. Finish your point about the bench, because I think that was or sub outs. I think that was an incredible thing to think about.
Yeah, and then obviously from that, Drew and Derek White were a natural tandem coming out, and then obviously the 2 that are responsible for this whole deal, Tatum and Brown, came out in tandem as well. So I thought that was, it's not something you draw up on a whiteboard, not something you plan for, but I thought the way they ended up doing it in the moment with all the things going through their head, if this is finally over, I thought that went really, really well. I was happy to see that. Just as a a casual viewer watching a team close out a championship after a drought that went far longer than anyone expected, except for maybe Boston fans.
Yeah, the Boston fan thing today, like you're going to hear completely different narratives from Boston media, from everyone else's media right now, and it's like, first title since 2008, first title for the city since 2019. Like you're going to hear all these dumb things in the background, and it's just like, guys, like just enjoy the fact that they did it. Like just enjoy the fact that this team.
Exactly.
The more I still sit here and look at this roster, Brown, Tatum, Horford, like it doesn't feel like they have two guys that are incredible players, but they don't have a Luka. They don't have a Jokic. They have a team that's an incredible team, and that's ultimately what got them the championship. I'll pose this question. How will you remember the season for the Celtics? We kind of talked about it a little bit there in some spurts about the games themselves, but how will you remember this whole season for the Celtics?
I mean, considering they won 80 games when you include the postseason part of their schedule, maybe the widest range of outcomes from a team within a season ever, especially a team of this caliber. I'll say it for the 90th time because it might be the last time I get to say it, but the lowest floor 60-win team I've ever watched in my life. They went from captivating the basketball world trying to lose to the Pistons to, they didn't play a single game 6 in the playoffs. So, I mean, it is just that wide as far as, what their best is and what their worst is and how quickly they can go within a game from one extreme to the other and then back like we saw in game 3. Very exciting to watch because as dominant as they are, as impressive as they'll line up statistically within history, you never knew if they were going to win a game until the clock expired because they showed ability to go up 20. They showed an ability to let a team come back all the way down to, it was like 4 points, whatever it was in game 3. And that was a microcosm of their season. They had some weird like Sunday matinee games they would lose. You just never really knew. You're never comfortable. It was a very uncomfortable season for Boston. One, because they set out in the campaign in October with the expectation of being this team at this stage winning the title. And that's a lot to carry on your shoulders considering, the only two guys left from the bubble had been the two mainstays and they hadn't done it yet. They've been to the Eastern Conference Finals almost every year. They'd only broken through to the finals one time prior to this season. And they just showed an inability to play up to that stage at that point. Now, 2 years later, they get another shot. They're not the new upstart team. They're the other team across the court, a little bit more experience. I think that did show a little bit, and they got it done. So I don't think they'll get a fair shake historically because everyone hates Boston outside of Boston, and hell, half of Boston's fans hate Boston. Which, given how that team played some nights, some games of series is kind of fair. They're a little bit too miserable, I'll say. I mean, when your city's title drought is 5 years and it feels like eons, I don't have much sympathy for you, but I'm going to remember it as a very impressive team, but one that I had to watch entire games because, they would beat teams by 40. They'd smoked, I think it was Milwaukee one night, some like big juiced up matchup, and they just murdered them. And you're like, this team is going to win a title. And then they would go and play some just all out war with a 40-win team like 36 hours later. And you're like, well, what the hell did I just watch against the other night? I mean, how do I not have a middle ground? So very, very entertaining. I'm not surprised at all, even though I was one of the dumb people that picked them to lose the series. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'll never do it again. I mean, we said it after game 4 and they hadn't won the title yet. I'll never do it again. There's never. No. And what's crazy about this whole, I'm glad we're having this conversation right now the way we're having it, because I get what you're saying. I hear everything about like there was moments with this team throughout the year, but there was also moments where even when they were doing those things, they were still really dominant. Like I remember, again, I talk about the Noah Dazzo conversation a lot because at that time they were just starting to show us championship form. And like throughout moments of the year, I said to her, I'm like, I mean, like it's December and I think they're going to win the title outright. And yet I don't, but yet I continuously had this fear for them where I'm like, they're going to do the thing we all think they're going to do.
Right.
And that's why I can't, that's why what you're saying isn't wrong. Like I can't, there's no argument against it because it's true. But yet the entire time, if any other team other than Denver won the title, I would be a little bit surprised.
Yeah. That's
in
fair.
a roundabout way, that's really the truth. Like it's one of those things where you're like, the West is this, and the West played out like we saw it. The East was, Boston was going to be in the finals. We all said that. Boston was going to be in the finals. I think the way you worded it was like, I can't remember exactly now. It was like right after the preview I put up with Chris O'Brien. You said something to the effect of like Boston's there, but who are they playing or something like that. It was like basically like
with Embiid going down and the Heat series devolving into what it did, and they still lost a game in that series.
I think it was like not making the finals was a failure. I think it's something to that effect. And I was like,
that's where the bar was. When you looked at the East and how it stacked up and how teams entered postseason play, if they didn't make the finals, when are you ever? It was essentially, I mean, Giannis was down. It just, so many things lined up to where they didn't need the breaks, but then they also had the breaks, being that good of a team. And you're just like, this has to happen now. This has to happen this year. And they may have, even if they get to the finals and lose, you at least have to have proof of concept of like when everything goes right and you're a dominant team, you've got to at least get to the finals.
Honestly, I was still with you. I still think that would have been a failure if they didn't win it. I mean, look, history tells us that you're going to look. We have all the data in front of us. We have Basketball Reference. We have stuff back to before Jerry West plays, and it's out there. I mean, it is what it is, right? And yet we're still going to go 5 to 10 years. We're going to have this conversation in 10 years when we're, in our late 30s, and we're going to say, yeah, Boston won the title. They were the most dominant team that year. They had games where you really had to watch. Like you're gonna say the same thing you said when I asked you that question, and none of us are gonna remember, even with the data we have in front of us, that they lost a game to the Heat, that they lost a game to this team and that team,
right?
Because the Lakers in 2000, they lost the one game to the Sixers. No one, we know that the Sixers did it. Like we all know they won that game, but we don't look at it and go, oh my God, it was our failure. We go, they were one of the most dominant teams ever, right. And they were. I mean, we just take that stuff and we say, it was really relevant for context at the time, but as things shake out, really it'll only matter if we look at this team statistically, which we will. It's already been brought up. We've already been in text threads about it. You know what I'm about to say is they're statistically one of the best teams ever, and we can't not say that that's true. But that's when you have to start looking at, okay, well, if they are, what were the things that separated them? And you're going to think in the back of your mind they were going to always blow leads. You're going to think in the back of your mind that they lost to the Heat because the Heat shot like 70% from three or whatever it was, right? Even if it was a fluke game. Cleveland won a game or whatever. Like Cleveland won a game at home, for crying out loud. Cleveland won a game at Boston. Like there's
game
just there's just things about this that in a way don't make any sense, and yet we're sitting here talking about one of the most dominant teams in the last 25 years. It doesn't.
How much of it is because people, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but Tatum is not viewed as a Jokic, as a Luka, as a Giannis, as maybe even a Shea, depending on who you ask. Like, is that what's holding them back from getting the recognition? Because their best player is not seen as, for example, when LeBron was doing it, the best player in the world easily. The conversation was, we were saying if Luka wins this finals, he's the best player in the world. No one's saying Jason Tatum is the best player in the world. One, because he's not. But two, does that affect how this team gets viewed in 10 years, in 5 years? Is that going to be the Achilles heel?
I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming because I've done shows with you long enough. I also did send you the questions for like the first time in a decade. Halfway down this list, I have the conversation about Tatum's all-time legacy, young guy with a lot of wins to win a title. And it all relates back to what you're asking. So the hard part for me is, I haven't had enough time to digest the fact that it just happened. So that really doesn't help the all-time. Like, him winning a title, does that put him at 4 for me currently? Probably not.
I know. It
sounds stupid, and because you know exactly who's 4. Like without even saying
a lot.
it.
Yeah.
And then but that title should be, if the whole argument we've had is hardware the thing that I said this to Chris O'Brien. I hope everyone listened to it. It's one of the best conversations I've had about an award or about a best player in the world category in a really long time. Chris made the point about Luka, and he brought first real person to bring up to me that he could be the best player in the world if he wins it, whatever. And he's like, I 100% think he already is. And I was like, okay, that's fair. I said, but in a roundabout way, we talked about it for about 10 minutes, and I said, doesn't the hardware still ultimately matter? I said, what's differentiating him from Luka or from Jokic? It's 3 MVPs in 4 years, and it's a best player on a championship team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gap between those two, and so
it's large too.
The counter argument would be, if it's on the same playing field, would be, well, Tatum could be 4 over Shea, and I would hear any argument for that. The
Right.
problem is, my eyes still tell me I want a player that I think can go into a game as consistently as possible. And I've been in so many arguments about Tatum this week, it makes my head spin, where I'm like, I'm defending him, and yet I still think Shea's better. I still would end the season and begin the next season with Shea being the fourth best player in the league and Tatum being the fifth. And I don't think that's a disservice to either guy. I think that this year alone, Shea proved to us in 1 year that he can get his team to a place and he can do things in those playoffs. The playoffs weren't his fault. Like, let's just be upfront about that.
Oh,
It's
no.
not.
No, he was incredible individually. Absolutely.
Tatum wasn't the Celtics' fault either. So, like, they're on the same playing field in those situations where he had an incredible playoffs. He had 3 bad games in the finals, 2.5 bad games. I'll defend game 1.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about them as like that's the only movement Tatum gets is like half a spot. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't help that he watched his teammate raise up the Finals MVP trophy. That does not help the discourse whatsoever.
But is that hardware really the thing that gets it? I mean, at that point, it's a Finals
No,
MVP.
I don't think so.
It's a
But if
title.
we're going to knock Curry for it for years, I think we've got to give Tatum a little bit of a dampening of the ascension, because I think he's 100%. I won't hear the argument for him being 6. I know that. He's at least 5. You can say 4 just because of what he just did 23 hours ago. And I, as a diehard Thunder fan, would have no serious qualms about it. I think it's that important to what he has shown ability to do. I mean, we were maybe a stupid PJ Washington 10 days from 3 away from Shea versus Tatum in the finals, which is looking very far ahead. But I can only help but dream of that at this point.
The guy at 2 and the guy at 4 literally played each other to get to eventually be the guy, could be the guy to play him in the finals.
Right.
I think it's just the reason on the notes and the questions I sent you, I didn't bring up Tatum's current thing is because A, I knew it was probably going to come up, and B, we just for 5 minutes just came to the conclusion that we all realized he's still 5th, which is what we said for weeks.
Right.
The all-time legacy part of it, I'm not doing this too early. I really promise this. I'm going to read you the most playoff wins before turning 27. I'm just going to read the list. It's not long. Hint. Spoiler.
That's not
crazy.
Yeah.
Most playoff wins before turning 27. Actually, would you like to guess who number 1 is? Before turning 27.
Before 27.
We haven't done Trivia Showdown with you this year, and this is kind of a fair start. I thought about
I
doing
had to
this as a
default
top
to
4.
LeBron, but then like it took him a good little bit to get rolling. He came in the league so young. I've got to say LeBron. I feel so stupid if it's not him.
He's not even in the top. He's not in the top 4.
Wow, okay.
Most playoff wins before turning 27. This guy in first has 76 and 3 titles before turning 27.
Oh God.
He may or may not be tattooed on the back of my leg.
I mean, yeah. Well, when you say it like that,
76 playoff wins before turning 27 years old and 3 NBA titles. Number 2, Tony Parker, 75 with 3 NBA titles as well.
Makes sense as well.
Magic Johnson. Yeah, Tony kind of threw me for a loop, but I was like, yeah, all things considered.
He was there
sense.
yeah.
But then, like, if he's on there, why is Timmy not on there? Like, Timmy must be, like, right below Tatum. Like, he just must be, like, right
far
below.
behind. No.
75 for Tony Parker, 70 for Magic. I'm honestly surprised Magic wasn't 1 or 2. Again, the common theme with the guys in first place and second place and third place is all above 70 and all have 3 championships. Tatum, 67 playoff wins. That does not include this one, so 68 now. They posted this, or they showed this in like the middle of that commercial-free YouTube TV zone.
Right.
Another chance to show us YouTube TV and not show us the freaking trophy on the court. Like I'm still have my qualms about that. And 0 championships they just had to point out in the graphic. So at that time, and so I bring it up because it's really weird. I don't have like a direction I want to go with this, or even like land with this, or even do it today if we have to. But his all-time legacy right now is more in a pendulum swing than his current legacy, which is so crazy to think that there are guys that could even be possible with. But he's now in a place where he's one of the most successful players, like we just established, under the age of 27. He has a championship. He's missing, other than the All-NBAs and like the things that just are going to put you in a place against other guys, MVP votes, etc. Like I wish someone brought this up the other day on a pod, and it was incredible, and I wish I remember who it was. But basically, like the top we should have like MVP voting should just tell us every year who the top 10 is, which it kind of can. We can kind of look at it and kind of figure that out. Like I told you why I voted against Shea, and I felt terrible about it or I didn't at the same time, because I was like, ultimately he's going to be remembered as the second best player this year,
right?
And the defensive team was a disgrace to that. My whole point is Tatum, we're going to look at this and go, well, he's finished this many times in MVP voting up high. He's finished the All-NBA first team this many times, and people were arguing against it this year, which I still think is absolute lunacy. Over Brunson, of course. Brunson was the guy in consideration. And then we're just missing the fact that like he doesn't have an MVP and a Finals MVP, and he's 27. Or before 27, he's 26. So, again, I don't have a point or a question. I'm just making it clear that his all-time legacy was affected by this title a heck of a lot more than being the fifth best player in the league, which ultimately, as you build a resume, is going to be irrelevant until your career's over. So.
Yeah, and I think build is a key part of that. He is only 27. He has a lot of quality NBA years left. And as much as this title vindicates the longer than expected path it took him to get here, he's not done yet. And I think his long-term legacy will be affected more by his next 5 years than his last 5 years. Because once you get to this point, you win a title this young, relatively speaking, NBA-wise. I know he came in at 19, et cetera. But it just goes to show how hard it is to win a title and what things have to happen, what you need around you, all these things. And so if he does end his career with double his playoff wins and one title, that has so much less staying power and just, I guess, a grip on the era as far as like where we slot him in, fourth, fifth, whatever, for this decade, for this, whatever you want to call it, this kind of era post LeBron being in the finals every year, essentially. Which is how we've gotten 6 champions in 6 years, by the way, which I thought was really cool. But
it's awesome. It's incredible for the league, without a doubt.
It's good for the league, yeah. But I think that for Tatum individually, it's crazy it took this long to get a title. The playoff wins show, again, how close he's been, how that many times he's consistently the favorite to win the East or among them. They've probably had home court in the East for however many years in a row, save for maybe one weird year. But I think it's what he does from here on out, now with proof of concept. He is a capable player, a capable best player on a championship winning team. A lot of leadership qualities there as well. And you could, get into the Jaylen Brown argument. I don't think that does a lot of good as far as what Tatum's accomplished. I think we can save that for First Take next week. But I think that I have so much faith in him as a player just because of where we're putting him now and what we project out, and thinking that like this will not be his only title. And so I think as much as he's built so far legacy-wise, will he get to 3? Maybe not. But I think he gets at least one more. I mean, if the East keeps shaping up in this way, they didn't even need the breaks that they got necessarily. I know they blew game 2, the first 2 series. They won 8 of their next 9 playoff games. So there's something to that. So, as far as where he is all time, I have no idea. I'm not as in tune with that as you are. I know you've done it in the past. I'm sure Nick Wright will have his pyramid or whatever, but I think that.
So one thing I still appreciate Nick for every year, even if it's wrong, even if it's
great.
Not wrong, even if it's objectively bad in spots. I actually think that, funny enough, I'll give him a compliment. You've probably seen this. If not, I'll send it to you. The thing he does, and guys do some variation of, like the Ringer does their top 100. Like there's guys that do all kinds of lists, right? He does this thing where like it's in a roundabout, long story short way. It's a club. It's a are you in
the superstar?
Club?
Yeah, club superstar
club,
yeah.
Club superstar. Right? Yeah. I couldn't think of the name, and it's incredible because the graphics to go along with it like are so dumb and outlandish. And just like at one point he had like, this was when Kevin Durant was like tearing apart the league, like right after Golden State, and like he was still like winning, but not, Kevin Durant. We get what I'm saying. But he was like, he had like Kevin Durant like outside of the club, standing in front of the bouncer, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like it's lunacy, but neither here nor there. I have to compliment Nick Wright, probably the only time publicly in front of a microphone. So finish your.
Yeah, I mean, to summarize, no, you're good. To summarize, I think Tatum to this point, that was the biggest thing missing, was the title, and now he can set his sights on, if he wants to, probably doesn't care, the individual things, the MVP regular season, the MVP of the finals. I think the MVP of the finals will happen naturally. Obviously, he didn't have his best series. Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, et cetera, were there to pick him up. That just speaks to the quality of the team, how deep they were 1 through at least 5, and how much better they were than their opponent in that respect. So I think that, again, this title is huge. His resume now has staying power. Those playoff wins mean something. They built towards the ultimate goal, which was a title. I'm in the camp of I don't think he's done winning titles. I don't know that he rips off 4 or 5, maybe even 3, but I'd be shocked if he retired with less than 2. And I think as you start adding those titles, even it's hard enough to get one. The multiple title club is even smaller, especially if you're the best player on those teams. You're the guy really responsible for whether they win or not in a lot of cases. And so I think I have a lot of faith in what he's able to do the next 5 years, as tough as the last 5 has been for him, and that culmination we saw last night and all the emotion of all that, which is something I'd said I'd look forward to. I think it was after game 2. And the recap we did, and just like, it's going to feel good, so good for him, for Brown, et cetera, everybody else in the organization, however long they've been there, to finally, it's not a long drought. 2008, it seems like forever ago. Time flies. So, and he wasn't even there for half of it. So I think it was huge for him individually. His all-time legacy, his legacy now, it may not vault him up the individual player standings as we see it now. But I think a lot of things met their deathbed last night as far as narratives about him, and it may still be said, but it's just not true anymore. Yep. I was impressed by it. I'm excited to see what he's got in store going forward now that he has that one title under his belt. And it's crazy to say that the day after, but I don't think he's anywhere close to done.
No, without a doubt. I mean, they're doing things that, like, the typical NBA history that tells us is like, you're 28. 28 is like, you start winning titles, you start doing things like Jokic did last year and the last couple of years, and they're 26, and I think Brown's close to 27 at this point. I think he's really close to 27. Like, the 26 is the new 28 now. It just is. It's just the way we look at things. We've talked about that before, like where we see NBA history and how it evolves. Guys' primes are younger now, and so the level, not necessarily the level of criticism, but the timeline of the criticism is shifted. It's like it's the goalpost shifting thing that we always talk about, where it's like you have more time now to tear these guys down. As awesome as Wemby is, just wait. If he's not in the playoffs in year 3, I mean, it's going to be like burning a forest down, like in San Antonio, whatever. You get my point. Not to sidetrack us in any way possible. 2 things really quick. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't even want to spend 30 seconds on it, but did the right player win Finals MVP? About the Tatum hardware thing, did Jaylen Brown ultimately, was it? I mean, the stats were closer than you think. Like, the stats were, it kind of blew my mind.
And you could put as much weight as you want to on the final game, the last round of a title fight, whatever you want to call it.
What we remember the most, et cetera.
Interesting degenerate note. Do you want to guess what Tatum closed at to win Finals MVP when FanDuel took it off the board last night?
Do you know when they took it off? Does that matter?
It was late enough in the game to where the game was not in question.
Okay. He was probably the favorite. He was probably the favorite.
He was. I'll give you that. He was the favorite.
He was probably like minus 250 or something stupid like that.
Minus 550.
And yet,
and he lost the vote 7-4. Yeah.
See, this is. I didn't even look at the number because I was like, it's just.
Which was correct. I found the ballot this morning. Again, in my opinion, Jaylen Brown had the more steady contribution. Again, his expectations are a touch lower than Jason Tatum's because we look at Jason Tatum to be the best player, and he wasn't for about half the series, which is okay because we've talked about it 1,000 times. They were the better overall team. They had more contributors that were available even without Porzingis, at least being Porzingis for a lot of this series, which is something they navigated throughout the entire playoffs. So, I don't think that Tatum deserved it. Would I have been shocked? No. He had 31 in the closeout game. One of his better playoff games is a Celtic, honestly, and he's won a million of them, as we just alluded to. But, even with him closing the gap statistically, impact-wise, what have you, especially with how Jaylen struggled last night, shooting at least. Him and Tatum kind of flip roles. But I think that the right guy got the Finals MVP. And I saw a picture of him next to Iguodala. That's ridiculous. Just stop it. I mean, Sam Hauser didn't win Finals MVP. That was, if Peyton Pritchard had gotten the Finals MVP for the 2 half-court shots, then we can put him next to Iguodala. That's fine. But no, I think was Brown for me. Drew Holiday flirted with it for a day. That's fine. That just speaks to how much Tatum struggled. We were talking about Drew Holiday winning the freaking Finals MVP.
I mean, to be fair, you and I talked about Porzingis after game one, and a lot of people didn't do that. So it was, it happened. It's a conversation.
There's an NBA universe where he won that thing and he played all 5 games. But that was a long shot as it was reflected in the odds. So, but ultimately, I spoke about it when we first brought up the odds. I thought, at that point, Jalen was a more consistent contributor, was exceeding expectations the most, and I think was the driving force behind making up for a bit of Tatum's struggles early in the series. So, 7-4, that feels right. Tatum got some respect, got some votes. That's fine. Shouldn't have been unanimous. Wasn't close. But I'm happy with the result of that.
So, not to sidetrack us in any kind of manner, but you mentioned how many years in a row they had home court. And it bothered me bad enough not knowing it that it was, hey, do you scrap it for a trivia showdown segment or do you just do it now because it bothers you bad enough? And here we are. I don't technically, what's really annoying is Basketball Reference, as much as I love them, they have the East in order of the numbers. So 1, 8, 4, 5, etc. The West, they do not have in that order for God knows what reason. It's Dallas, LA, Denver, LA, Minnesota. God, I forgot Denver played LA. I completely forgot that they played them. Minnesota, Phoenix, and OKC, New Orleans. That's the order they have them in for whatever reason. But the East is right, so we're going to go back. This year, really quick. Boston, Miami. Of course, Boston home court. Duh. We're going to, whatever, thumbs up there. Next year, they had home court as well. Boston over Atlanta. They were the 1 seed as well last year. Whatever. We know that they were up there. Again, I don't know. I have to trust this order. They were the second. I can do this. I'm so dumb. I can literally do it off the Celtics page. All right, forget it. So we got it. So 3 years in a row, right? 2022, they were second in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going off of what it says. Finished second in the East, right? Second in the East in 2021, 2022. They finished 7th in the bubble year. So I know you mentioned minus a weird year.
Yeah.
So let's just 36 and 36, Brad Stevens. Let's just skip that for a second. Brad Stevens was the coach back then. They were 3rd in 2019-20. 48 and 24.
That's hosting. Yeah.
They were 4th in 18-19, 49 and 33. Mm-hmm. They were 2nd in 2017-18, 55 and 27. They were 1st in 2016-17, 53 and 29. And they were 5th. So technically, if you don't count the bubble year, which, this is NBA history talk. We get to choose when we talk about the bubble and how
You're a Lakers fan. We'll count it. That's fine.
Yeah. We get to choose when it's real and when it's not. It's not in this case. They went 36 and 36. They wouldn't have had a chance, whatever you want to say. But they went all the way back to 15-16. They technically, if you just want to say in X amount of years, 9 years, they had home court 8 of 9 years. Awesome. Great.
For at least around. Yeah.
And by the way, some of those were Isaiah Thomas years. Some of those were Some of those were Brad Stevens overachieve years that overlap with Isaiah Thomas years. Some of those were Tatum and Brown rookie years. Some of those were Tatum and Brown sophomore years when we all thought nothing was possible with them at the time.
Right.
That was back when Brown had the flat top. This feels like NBA history, okay? Really.
Oh yeah.
All things considered. Anyway. Really quick on Brown, because it just we can't just not talk about him for 8 to 10 minutes, and then I can't just not ask you this. But I'm not expecting us to go into this where does he fall right now thing again like we did with Tatum, but it definitely needs to be talked about.
Right.
I'll tell you the only reason I really want to talk about it is because neither of us voted him for All NBA team. So I'll ask you. I wanted to not send this one to you, but I did. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you regret not voting for Brown for an All-NBA team this year?
I'd say 5 out of 10 because as lame as it is, this was outside of the, realm of what you're voting on. But obviously,
that's fair.
A lot of what we say about reputations and, your status in the league gets made in these games. You have an opportunity to win 16 up, and he just did it. So I think whether it's merit regular season or not, next year he will be on an All-NBA team. He is one of, if not the best second options in the league, and you can say second option, you could say 1B. I don't think they're that far apart. But for all intents and purposes, Jason Tatum is the best player on that team. And I think Jaylen Brown has solidified himself as a top 15 player in the league, which doesn't always translate to All NBA. But now with it being positionless, you can put players wherever. And with the games restriction aspect, which he does not struggle with much, which is nice. I would be stunned if we're not at midseason having him on All NBA team, and then also at the regular season wrap up, also having him on our ballot still. And again, that may not all be regular season oriented, but there are things outside the regular season that influence us when we do vote on things like All NBA, which is technically only regular season.
So I'm really glad that A, we have this documented for the whole world and for however long this show goes on, and B, I'm really glad that I document my own notes for X amount of years, and I'm glad that I've done a great job of record keeping. I'm going to read you my third team, and it's going to be a nice reminder to both of us. I had Steph, Booker, George, LeBron, and I had Jaylen Brown. I voted for him and forgot.
I thought you had him. Yeah.
I voted for him and forgot. So here's my question then. Is he already a top 50? Is he a top, again, think about All NBA as your barometer. You don't have to go that way necessarily, but is he a top 15 player right now?
I think so. If not prior to this finals and the late stages of the postseason, he sure is now. Okay. He has more room to ascend among the ranks of NBA players where we see now, but I think he did the jump people may want Tatum to experience. I think Brown is having, jumping guys like Butler, things like that, just because of what have you done for me lately, which fair or unfair, it's going to happen. It's kind of how the discourse goes with the NBA. But I think he's probably closer to 12 than 15. So I think he's well on his way.
We'll play a fun game. All right, Shea, Luka, Jason, Giannis, Jokic. That's the five we literally already talked about. That's both of our first teams. Done.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it alone, right?
Yeah.
All right, so just again, these are in no particular order, but just stop me if there's one that you're absolutely like, I'm not sure. Like only let me keep going if they're 100% ahead of him.
Okay.
I'm already pausing because I'm like, I think this is going to get really airy really fast.
It won't take long.
Brunson.
Yeah. Just because of
right now, Brunson's ahead of him.
Yeah. It's not some chasm, but I think
I'm
now.
with you. Yeah. A lot of people have him sixth right now, Brunson. As crazy as that sounds. Edwards.
Yeah.
See, this is crazy. Like, we're already getting to closer to 10 than we are to 5. Like, this is crazy. Durant.
Yeah.
Durant's still better right now.
Not for much longer, but yes, right now.
Kawhi.
Right now. Oh, man. That might be the one I'm like, ugh.
Kawhi, who I voted for second team. Remember that.
Well, yeah. And I mean,
I still regret that one.
It's not a healthy Kawhi thing. It's a when is Kawhi healthy thing. Because healthy Kawhi is better than Jaylen Brown. But the mean Kawhi Leonard we get in a regular season is A, either not playing, or 2, not himself. So
all right.
That's a weird one. But
for fun, let's just take Kawhi out for a second. That would be 8 so far. We're confident with 8. We're confident that Jaylen Brown is not a top 8 player. Anthony Davis.
Anthony Davis is better than him.
Thank you. Steph. Is Steph still a top 10 player is essentially what we're asking.
Yeah, for no reason because they lose anyway, but yes, he is.
Okay. Devin Booker. See this.
I want to come back on here. So
I knew this was, no, I knew this was coming because this is like this is basically where you draw the line in the sand. You go, why would you have Booker over this guy over that guy? You can start a list.
Getting uncomfortable. I'll say that we're getting down into the. Yeah.
There's a finals appearance in there. There's a consistent best player on a winning team. The argument in there in the last 5 years. There's things that like are in his favor, but we're not sure, so we're gonna skip. All right. So right now we have 10 ahead of him without a doubt. Right? Or no, we have 1, 2. We have 1, 2. That was 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10. So Steph was 10. At that point, Paul George.
I almost lean Jaylen. And it's crazy because I'm pretty sure I had Paul George 13. But
I do too. I do too. Okay, so let's just uncomfortably say 11. At that point, I'll just name a few names. Just say Jaylen's 11. We'll just go like, would you have this guy ahead of him instead? Say like, move him to 12. Right now, would you have Jaylen Brown or LeBron? That's the hardest one because like we're talking 19 years to 7 here. I get it.
I mean, if
like,
LeBron has like an F it night, he could be the best player on the planet for 2 hours.
Fair. That's true.
He might not have more than 5 of those in his gas tank, but I gotta say LeBron. Until he literally can't walk, I'd probably say LeBron over a lot of people.
Okay, so uncomfortably, Jaylen Brown is now the 12th best player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Victor Wembanyama.
He's better than Victor Wembanyama. Yeah, okay. That's a sample size issue.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The guys in the first team. Duh. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
Booker uncomfortably
close.
11th ahead of him. So Jaylen Brown right now to us he is a top 12 player in the NBA,
which is squarely all NBA third team. So I think that's a good exercise.
What's dumb is it didn't solve anything, but it just think about what that sounds like though. To some people, all NBA third team is like this shaming ground where it's like, okay, well there's a bunch of guys fighting for it.
Yeah.
He's the think about that number for a second.
He's
the
world.
12th in the world, basically. Yeah, he's the 12th best player in the world.
8 billion people. Yeah.
If you that's a good way to put it. If you started a team, this is not how the Olympics works. Is you build a real team, but like if you sent the 12 best players to go play the world's 12 best players, which right now I think the world still would probably win, depending on depending on the circumstances of the league. Like I don't know, the Olympics in a month. Shocker, the U.S. comes in third again. But you send the 12 best players off. He's playing.
He's
in
there.
that game.
Yeah.
Like it had to be done because I want people to sit here and not have this like. Again, he doesn't win Finals MVP. We probably aren't even having this conversation. But that just gives you an idea of how he proved that contract. He got that contract. People thought it was insane. He spent all year proving it. Then he settled in. The team said, this is a team. We're going to get this figured out. We're going to be a team together or whatever, right? Everything they've been spewing out for days. I mean, even I wrote it down. It wasn't really a talking point for us. But in celebration, Al Horford was literally telling Tatum when they were mic'd up that he's a champion and not even worried about the fact that he had the longest drought in NBA history. 3 minutes left. Al Horford's worried about Jason Tatum winning a title. Like that just shows you like how this team was put together. Look, I've thrown a lot at you, and we still have things we haven't even gotten into. But is there anything that like we kind of skipped over, or I mean, you had the list in front of you. Like we haven't even talked about Dallas. I mean, we're 47 minutes in. We haven't talked about Dallas once.
I mean, I'll start on Dallas. I want a written apology from PJ Washington for masquerading not a Hornet for 6 freaking games. And now he's shooting like I do my backyard.
Dang it. I forgot to text Josh. I apologize.
I want an apology from Josh when I don't get one from PJ because 47% against my poor team of destiny 1 seed Thunder. And he's 29% in every series outside of that. And he was 6 of 20 something in the finals. That's my bitter Thunder point of the recap, just because I have to sneak one in every single time. 0 of 5 last night because why not? What's one more clunker game when you've just fallen off a cliff since you sent the Thunder home with your free throws of shame? But I think that actually does have a point as far as the finals, because it speaks to the role players and how they were MIA for large parts of the series. And we said going in, Luka was not beating his team by himself. And we said Luka and Kyrie in tandem could not beat this team by themselves. And Kyrie said, oh, really? Watch this. And he'll play bad for 4 out of 5 games, especially the contest in Boston. What's that loss up to the streak? 13 games now?
I think it's more than that, because I think when I brought it up to you, it was 0-12.
So it's at least a dozen, at least more than a dozen. So it's a lot.
Oh, yeah. It's getting
and he had to dust up with
a
fan. And one mean word in TD Garden, he just can't play basketball for 2 hours, which I'm not going to go into why that is, but he kind of brought it on himself. I'll end with that. But, Luka individually, it's kind of similar to Shea against Dallas. Like individually, you take that in a series, and his individual numbers are pretty good, even relative to where we see those top 5 players in the world individually and expectations as far as leading your team to the playoffs, etc. And for Dallas, it's going to be weird to see where we remember this team, because they got through a Western Conference no one thought they could. No one thought they should. And I wouldn't even say they dodged Denver, because we saw Minnesota come back from down 2-3 in a series and beat them in a Game 7 in Denver. So I think that was a worthy opponent, Western Conference Finals wise, and they just toyed with them. They destroyed them. And you had a Minnesota question, so we can segue into that if you want to. But as far as Dallas goes, this is the furthest thing from a failure. Hit me with the Minnesota question.
No, I mean, you can keep rolling because I think everything you're saying is legit. It's less about the question for a minute. I want to touch on the Dallas, like 6 of their top 7 scorers are signed through 25-26. So it's less about what they can do. But like I think it's a question because I think they're missing something because that's clearly a thing you've mentioned. But, I mean, the whole Minnesota question, the whole point of it was like, it honestly should have been brought up 30 minutes ago when we talked about the dominance. Like, I think that dominant stretch that we talked about with Boston is one of the best like stretches of stuff we've done in a long time because it just spoke to the emotions of, again, 2 neutral, unbiased fans, media members, if you will, talking about a team that they had to watch objectively for a long time. Right. And yet I sat here and I went, this was a legitimate question. I wrote this last night. I'd have to look at the order again of like when Google Docs tells me I wrote it. But I wrote that before the game was over. I said, could Minnesota have beaten this Boston Celtics team? I don't think so.
I don't think so. In hindsight of how unprepared they looked against Dallas for that stage, which Anthony Edwards is 22 years old, they're going to be fine. The direction of that franchise is not falling into an abyss. They're going to be just fine. He, as Shea did, had to kind of lick his wounds after a playoff run that ended short of where we thought it would. And that just speaks to they're both still very young. It happens. It happened to Lucas several times. He's broken through, even though he's younger than Shea, which is crazy. It just kind of shows that it takes failure in the postseason to ultimately, make that full path. And it's very, very rare when you win titles as the best player at a young age. And we read off the list earlier, those are mortal walk Hall of Famers. Forget about it. I wouldn't say Tony Parker was the best player on the Spurs, but that's still. I think that, could you throw around KP having the same injury in the same instant of the series? Maybe. So I would say no on Minnesota just because of how I saw Anthony Edwards look at times in the Western Conference Finals and how Rudy Gobert at some point in each postseason gets played off the floor. It started with the Suns a couple years ago, and he's never really shaken those allegations, if you will. So if there was a big tandem that I thought was going to beat Boston, it was Denver, with Jokic, the best player in the world to many people, including myself, and then Aaron Gordon, who is a little bit like Lively, shown an excellence in filling his role and doing what he needs to do as kind of a cleanup guy almost. And so I think Minnesota, no. Denver, maybe. But even then, just seeing what I saw from Boston, the good, the bad, the ugly, when you put it all together, they still won a title. So I think that I would say no to Minnesota just because, Anthony Edwards' first true, real go at it with expectations of, at least getting to the Western Conference Finals, which they did. But no, I don't think Minnesota, Boston either. It might have been 5 again, to be honest.
Yeah, and I want to sit here and tell you that Ant would have had a game that shocked Boston or something. I feel like there would have been
that's the one, honestly. Yeah.
But I at that point I'm arguing is it 6 possible? But that's not the whole point of my question. There was even I guess it was, but there was this argument or this thing we were gonna potentially do. And I told you to maybe prepare for, and then I'd never told you we'd scrap it. But the 2022 title not happening for Boston is one of the biggest reasons they won this one. So right. We were going to have this whole conversation about could they have really beaten Gold State because they were up 2-1. That loss, the 2023 loss to the Heat, a team that we talked about at least 5 times together. So there's things that Boston had to do to get here, and a Minnesota thing. Yes. That's just a comparison I wanted to try to make to understand how good the Celtics team really was. Dallas, you don't really have to have an answer for me. I didn't give it to you super time oriented here, but is there something Dallas needs? Because the hard part to compare this question to is, well, if they play Boston again, and Boston's pretty much the same team as well, I don't really know what changes. But something look, Mark Cuban and the guy, the GM Nico I always get his last name mixed up with somebody else. Nico, we're going to say, the Nike executive guy,
Sure.
the guy that you voted for
Executive of the year.
Executive of the Year, and I voted for Brad Stevens. So both fair choices here. I mean,
Yeah, that'll work.
I don't think you thought when you gave him the vote on the pod 2 months later he'd be in the finals, right?
No.
But it's still the point. Like my question isn't geared as like, tell me a move right now that Dallas has to do, but is there something that you'd be eyeing if you were Dallas that could potentially get you over the hump, whether it's against Boston or not?
One, a version of Kyrie Irving that appears to be Kyrie Irving. That would not hurt on this stage.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's not even like I don't think they're missing anything. They're just missing things from the players that got them to this point. We've spoken to the role players
That's
1,000
really
times.
Yep.
They had the team to do it because they got there. Yes, they ran into a 64-win team. That's going to happen. They had a legitimate chance, and of course, it didn't happen because everybody on ESPN said they were going to beat Boston. Which, whatever, we fell into that trap too. It speaks to Luka being the most feared player on the planet, etc. He'll win in Game 7 on the moon. Doesn't matter. Blindfold him. Who cares? So I think that it was not long ago. This Dallas team was the most misfit, put together team in the league, probably. You throw in the casual top 3 player in the NBA at worst in Luka. This is a team that tanked to get out of the play-in last year, which I thought was pretty stupid, but it netted them the draft pick they turned into Derek Lively, which has been excellent for them through 1 year. So I think the team that they have and then the staying power they have, because like you mentioned, they're signed under contract. We might not see a lot of Tim Hardaway Jr. in Dallas next year, but we'll see. But I think they have the team to get there. They got there. It's more of just like, and it's frustrating because of how easy it sounds, but the players that got them there have to play better. That's just, that's it. You can't, there's no waiver wire in the middle of the finals like, oh, go find somebody who can hit a 3. I mean, it's just, one, it's Boston's defense. It's not just Dallas can't hit a shot.
The corner
but,
three,
I mean, wide open threes,
like pushing guys to the corners and forcing them to make them, and I get it. Yeah,
Maverick starters wide open threes in the finals, 17.6%. That's embarrassing. You can't have that. Wild. Boston was 43%. I mean, that's not where the series is won and lost, but that sure as hell doesn't help when you're facing, again, one of the thoroughly statistically dominant teams in the NBA. That is not too deep as far as contributors and key role guys. They've got 5 of them. If you want to throw Porzingis in there, whether you put him in the lineup or not, starter-wise, alongside Drew and White and Tatum and Brown. So I think that it didn't help that this was the team they faced as far as Boston being as good as they were. But what they missed from the guys that got them to where they were was just the nail in the coffin, I think. It was like if they were going to overcome, the historic things that told us, of course, Boston's going to win. They needed finals edition Kyrie Irving. They needed some smaller downgrade of PJ Washington against the Thunder, hitting 40% from 3. Derek Jones Jr. was not scoring 20 points in this series either. And so, they needed it in this series. They got it against the 1 seed, and then it just did not follow them through. So I don't think you need to change much, which is like the last answer any NBA team that just fell short wants to hear. But I think it speaks to how well they built the roster, how good the Lively pick was. And so I think that, it would have taken some out-of-body experience from like Exum or somebody to bridge the gap essentially to what they were missing from role players and what it would have taken to beat a team like Boston. So I think that no violent course correction like Boston kind of had to do the last 2 years after losing the finals, after losing to the Heat. So I don't think they're in that boat, but and they'll tweak things. My executive year, I'm sure we'll figure it out. But the midseason piece of PJ and Gafford coming in, Gafford had a finals to forget. But I think they made all the right moves. It's just how hard it is to win a title. You can do all the right things, ace the trade deadline, ace the draft, whatever. Somebody's still better than you for, a best of 7. So they have staying power in the West. I still think that'll be viewed as the better conference next year.
Without a doubt.
Yep. So I think I won't say run it back. That sounds too cliche, but what they put in place to get them there this year could absolutely get them there next year.
It got them there with a rookie center who's only going to get better, who we talked about as a top 5 rim finisher, and that doesn't even go into account his rim protection that's only going to get better. I think the best thing you said today, the things that they have things that they already have are the things that they can improve on, right? Getting those guys more comfortable. Now, is Derrick Jones Jr., are you going to win a title with him being your fourth best player?
No.
Probably not, but I'm stretching there saying fourth best player a little bit. I get it. But like Luka gets in better shape. Luka gets healthy. It's the first playoff series that long. He now knows what he needs to do. The defense stuff, the Brian Windhorst comments, like all the stuff that added up and piled on top of him. Like we can give him crap all we want, but what he did was incredible. It just is what it is, and there's no. He really shouldn't be getting any flack for this. I mean, he should be getting flack for the defense and some of the stuff Brian said. Like I'm there.
It comes with being the best player. So
fair,
yeah.
But to get them there and like to know that, even the Mike Breen, who is incredible, and I don't think there's a thing he says that's just outlandish when he speaks and gives his opinion. Because his job is not to give his opinion. His job is to tell you his opinion on a game that's happening currently, right? So when he shares his opinion about the league and about the way we see things, we should probably listen and open our eyes to it. And he talked about Luka, and everybody's hurt at this point, and everyone's feeling it, nicks and burns and bruises, and like that's fine. But like now they were him and Doris together were like talking about, and I'm paraphrasing a bunch here, but like basically just Luka now knows what it takes to win a championship, and like he seemed, getting into better shape, and they weren't like calling him out or anything. It was just that was exact. Go back and watch the final 3 minutes when they did those YouTube TV timeouts when they were talking in that 3-minute gap when they didn't have any commercials. It was incredible. It was some of the best Mike Breen stuff outside of the bang calls. Like it just was out there. It was the best. There's no smart deal for the Mavs. There's no smart deal that changes the course of your team in an 18-month span or less. And I think that's ultimately why I think the question is posed as, is there something they can do, but just know that there's really not, and they can work around the edges. They can figure it out. They did all the things. Honestly, I think the question kind of answers itself. Like you said, they did all the things already. It's just now refining.
A lot of the
those
work's
and
already
getting them
done.
there. Correct. I'm with you. Yeah. This is why I don't send you everything. I've got one thing I want to close on. We've addressed all the questions, so I guess before we close with this thing, I want to talk about. Is there anything about this series? Don't save this season, because have we already said publicly what we're doing next week? I don't think we have. We'll have a thing that used to be a really fun article, and we'll have it as a podcast next week. Long story short. Spare me the season, but anything about the series, the playoffs, anything before I give you my parting thoughts about something?
One thing I pulled from Twitter, Jason Tatum, for all the things we make fun of him for, fair and mostly not fair, led Boston in points, rebounds, and assists, won the title. He is one of 4 players ever to do that. He joins Tim Duncan in 2003, Magic Johnson in 1987, and LeBron James in 2012, 2013, 2016, and 2020, which is ridiculous.
Wait. I think I missed it. That's points, rebounds, and assists and win the title. Lead a team.
Leading your team in those 3, winning the title. LeBron's done it 4 times. We now have 3 other instances in the history of the NBA. Thanks.
Read the names again, because I can't believe he's on that list. Like I can.
Tim Duncan, Magic Johnson, now Jason Tatum, and LeBron James 4 times. Which is just absurd.
I guess if it's all 3 of the most important counting stats, but but that's I can't believe that's the list.
Yeah.
I honestly, Magic, I assumed he was on there as soon as you started talking. Hey, all right, you throw rebounds and assists out there with the 6'9", 6'10" point guard. Got it. Cool. Yeah. LeBron, got it. Cool. Yeah. Duncan's weird. I don't want to dive into Duncan right now, but what year? Do you have the year by chance? Did you say the year?
2003. Yeah.
You did say the year. 2003. He led them in assists. All right, we're doing this now. Dang it. Hold on. This has nothing. I know you want to finish your point. I just want to see 2003.
That was just proof I'm not a Jason Tatum hater. Yes, Jaylen Brown should have won Finals MVP. No, Jason Tatum is not a top 3 player in the world, even in the wake of his first title.
That was the year they
still had a hell of a series.
That was the year they played the Nets. I got it. I'm glad that we do this, because like you mentioned earlier, I love the history part of all of this, and it just really, listen, this was early Tony Parker, who had 21 shot attempts in game 3, I believe this is. Yeah, he had 21 shot attempts in Game 3, Tony Parker did. And yet Timmy still had 21 points on 13 attempts. Yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But it was those two scoring, and so Duncan leading those 3, it makes total sense. And I think he won MVP that year. So, Finals MVP. So, anyway, I got into a Duncan rant. I apologize.
That shocked me.
I know if there's anything else about the point. That was my fault.
I figured I had to be nice to Jason Tatum to close, just because of maybe it was perceived I was not. But I think that he didn't win Finals MVP, but it will not be forgotten at any point in history. His hand in this team becoming a contender, becoming the favorite to come out of the East, and for parts of the season, the favorite to win the title. He was recreating every post-title cliche ever last night, but he had every right to. So, like I said, I don't think this is one and done for him, for the Celtics, but it was cool to see him reach the top of the mountain after all those attempts came up short in recent history.
I don't have anything else to add to that. That would make it better or worse. So, I'm gonna read you a couple of things, and then I'm gonna. I can't not talk about history when it comes to this stuff. I know it probably bothers people, but just a couple of things that need to be said. I'll read them in order, and then I'll close with the thing I really want to close with. Joe Mazzulla is 35 years old. He's the youngest head coach to win the NBA Finals since. Do you know? Do you have a guess? You probably saw it last night.
Yeah, I saw it as a player coach. I forget the name.
The only player coach in our lifetime that really, or in our memory that really matters, it's Bill Russell.
Okay, all right, good.
Yeah, you were going to start grasping for player coaches that none of us know the name of. It's totally fine. Yeah. It's Bill Russell. Just remember, when you hear player coach, that's the first name and really the only name you should ever think of. So, Joe Mazzulla, if we're being real for a moment, I understand this is probably not going to be taken very lightly by people, but Joe Mazzulla is the youngest head coach to win the Finals. Let's just be real, okay? Player coach, Russell played if we're being honest, I can pull it up. Right, we have the things to tell us what happened. 1969 was his final year, and he averaged 9.9. He was 4th in MVP on the season. How do you finish 4th in the NBA regular season as a player, and yet you're a coach too? Like, come on, give me a break. I know it was different last year. That year, he averaged 19.3 rebounds. Like he had no time to be coaching if he was grabbing 20 rebounds. It's what it is. It's stupid.
Right.
He averaged 4.9 assists, and I think they didn't track anything else. So, played 42 minutes a game, but was a coach. So my point is Joe Mazzulla, youngest head coach in NBA history, in a asterisk style way. 107 playoff games played together for Jalen and Jason. By the way, I'm doing this because I think all of these are impressive, but I'm also chopping away at your list of Trivia Showdown questions. And so I probably shouldn't do a finals-related one anyway with you. 107 playoff games played together for Jalen and Jason. Don't have anything for you on the all-time legacy there. We already mentioned Al Horford, 186 games without an NBA title, most in NBA history. And then the thing I want to close with, I'm going to read you a resume of a Hall of Famer that was inducted this year. Or let me make sure on the year. He was inducted in 2023, I think, technically. I'm going to read you a resume of a player, and then I'm going to give you my point, and then we can talk about it. This guy was a Hall of Famer. Duh. Played 12 years in the NBA. He was a 5-time NBA champion. He's an 8-time All-Defensive Player, and he was the 86-87 Defensive Player of the Year. I gave you a year because I don't think this is not a guessing game here. I'll give you the rest. 873 games. Follow me here. 8.9 points, 3.2 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 46, 34, 83 splits. And to pair that with a 5-time champion, 8-time All-Defensive, and 1-time Defensive Player of the Year, and that's it. This guy's a Hall of Famer.
Oh, for sure. Are you
one
kidding
of the
me? Yeah.
One of the most beloved players of his era for what he did and provided. Now, remember that. Hold that thought for a second. I'm going to read you a guy that, if he's not a Hall of Famer and remembered as such in 25 less years, I will podcast about this subject alone for the rest of my being if this podcast doesn't exist. Two-time All-Star. Remember, guy before, not an All-Star. Two-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champion, 6-time All-Defense. Career stats of 975 games played, 16, 4.2, 6.4 assists, 46, 37, 78 splits. You want to take a crack at who I just read? He just won an NBA championship last night.
Drew Holiday.
Right. Michael Cooper's a Hall of Famer. Drew Holiday at this point, if he's not, this is not me telling you.
I saw it today, the
resume,
and you think, and you have to remove their name from it. The resume, the cupboard, whatever you want to call it. I think he's there, and he's not done either.
This is
because he's not retiring because he left Milwaukee.
What's crazy? I brought this up to you months ago. I think it was the beginning of this season. I said to you, "Yeah, remember the quote that just kind of floated out there when he was in Milwaukee the last year that said after they won the title, and he was basically like, after this contract's up, I'm done." Like he was
done. Yeah.
I get it. Guys say it all the time. This is not breaking news. He gets traded to Boston. He gets put on this amazing team like 4 days before a training camp, and now he's like, I kind of want to sign an extension. That's kind of cool.
For 4 years. Yeah.
It's like he's not done. And so my whole point is, this is not me defending. He's 34 years old, by the way. He turned 34 6 days ago. This is not me defending the Hall of Fame resume or the Hall of Fame anyway. This is not me doing that. That's not at all. I want that to be clear. But I just want it to be said, if he's not remembered in NBA history as fondly as he should be, he's the most pivotal piece of 2 title teams. I don't care about Game 6 Giannis. I don't care about this. I care about that. He was the second best offensive player in that series. He's the pivotal piece of 2 title teams in the modern era as an adaptable defensive anchor guard that didn't win Defensive Player of the Year because guards didn't win it for 20 years.
I mean, I'll make the same point I did. We were talking MVP a couple weeks ago as far as my thing with Shea was, don't let the mistakes of the past, Embiid winning last year, make mistakes happen in the future. So I think it's, they're not perfect in the history as far as who gets in, who doesn't get in, but it's never too early to start getting it right. And I think Drew Holiday, with what you just read, is a Hall of Famer. And you ask people that, casually watching the NBA, they're like, who is Drew Holiday? But obviously, like you said, key player on 2 title teams, that's tough to do. And I think that it should not be forgotten in NBA history. And what better way to cement his resume, which is still unfinished, by the way, with a Hall of Fame berth. So I'll be in that camp with you as well.
The difference in Michael Cooper and Drew Holiday is Drew Holiday's counting stats are ridiculous, right? That he had to be that a couple times. It's 3 NBA titles, which I know is a gap. It's 2 all-defensive teams, and it's a Defensive Player of the Year because, and I'll defend him in this regard, I already said it, but I'm just making sure the point's hammered so we can get out of here, is the way we view Defensive Player of the Year, even when bigs were starting to phase out here in the last 10 to 11 years on a consistent defensive winning. Rudy Gobert kind of changed that whole narrative. Like Rudy Gobert doesn't happen when he happens. Drew Holiday probably has a Defensive Player of the Year.
For sure. Yeah.
I would probably sit there and tell you I need a couple days to research that, but I would probably just say that now confidently as well. So, shout out to Drew Holiday. Shout out to the fact that was the way I'd like to close this. But we hit everything that I possibly wanted to hit that you brought up as well. It was an incredible year. This is not the bow technically on the season. Next week you'll hear a podcast from us too, one more time at the very minimum. Obviously, we got to get your trivia showdown lined up. I have 3 of them already done, ready and locked and loaded to go out in a few weeks. We'll have a really cool sit down coming up here with Noah Dalzo as well. Lock that down today. So super excited to have her back, talk about the season. People who don't want to hear about Boston are just going to have to, we just have to try to not to talk. Let's just right now make a promise on podcast to not talk about Boston as much as we probably should next week, because they're going to come up a lot in the topic, I'm sure. I won't spoil it. I want people to go check that one out. I think it'll be really good as a podcast instead of a written form. So let's get out of here. But before we do, plug away, talk about anything that you guys are working on. Obviously, the college baseball playoffs are in full, pun intended, swing. Or
anyway. Check swing if you're the SEC. So me and my college roommates from Clemson have a podcast called the 1009 podcast. I'm not bitter about Clemson's loss to Florida one bit, or Florida State's thing.
We are in the same place, okay? Anyway,
I'm a bitter ACC fan. But we cover all things Clemson, all things college athletics. Clemson was obviously hot in the streets baseball-wise for a time. Now they are not. Still watching Omaha. It's electric. It's actually shaping up to be the most viewed eyeballs-wise college World Series of all time, which is great for the game of baseball. Great for college baseball, one of the more underrated things that people don't watch enough of. But Omaha's been electric, a lot of one-run games, a lot of walk-offs, things like that. So even with Clemson removed, we still have our eyeballs on it, excuse me. So we'll have plenty of that stuff for you. Looking to finally get done editing what we got and get it out tomorrow. So look out for that on our Twitter at the 1009. All the links Trevor graciously includes in the tweets and stuff for this, so it's easy to find. So if you wander over there, thank you in advance.
Yeah, everything will be linked below as always. Man, I'm not putting a bow on the season, but it's just sad to think the next time I'm in front of a microphone, it technically won't really be me in front of a microphone. It'll be me a month prior. So, obviously we got one more together coming. We'll figure it out. We'll get that out. But until then, whether we do that now, next week, whatever, doesn't matter. It's been a really fun season. I appreciate you, as always, with the awards. Go ahead and get your ballot warmed up and ready. Preseason awards are only 3.5 months away. We got the Olympics. I'm sure we'll do something about the Olympics because there's probably 5 people that we can both name on our hand right now that will watch the Olympics, and I think we're 2 of the 5. So, and watch them like we probably like the basketball part of it and watch it and really care about it. TBT's coming up soon. Super excited about all of that and what they're doing. Sad that the closest game is 8 hours away from us, but whatever, it is what it is. We appreciate the TBT regardless. So without further ado, all the links for Grayson and myself and everything we talked about today will be in the top of the description. SeatGeek, don't forget, $20 off your first purchase, code 2pointers. Again, all of that stuff is below. Thank you guys for the support on everything, SeatGeek and otherwise. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast, and for officially the final time talking about the game of basketball for this season, we'll see you soon.